Chapter 20. The Journey. The weeks passed, and the rain lightened to barely a drizzle. It is time, Master Paen said, and then I heard Mayras approaching the Master's dish. Bren and I went outside to greet Sasojada, Banwido, my brother Darlian, and the large party of men assembled to make the 12-day journey east. Warriors, all fit and ready for a long journey. The pair of carriages that most assuredly contained Bren's payment of gold, and which would transport the guns for Khoorhani Ta's army, rolled up before the Master's dish. Bren inspected them. He was cheery, eager for the adventure, his white shirt billowing with the slight winds and reflecting the breaking sun. Bren wore his spectacles and his shoulder holster, and he had shaved his chin. I wore Mavarada along my back and was dressed in a beige tunic, a strong leather belt, and my suede boots. I also wore a pair of leather gauntlets given to me by my brother. I also carried a rifle, a useless relic, as Bren called it, slung over my other shoulder. It was a humid day, the earthworms wriggling in the mud, the frogs chirping throughout the whole jungle. I brought out the maps that Bren and I used to chart out our journey. We sat over a large rock and spread them out, reviewing how we'd start out. I fought against a nervous edge again, a slight shakiness, a queasy surrealism in the morning air. This would be my last day in Arkaya. Medea was placed in one of the coaches and all seemed ready, and yet I had not seen Paen. Was I to go with no uplifting words? Was I to man up now? Would I ever see him again? I could not say the words. I could do nothing. I grew heavy inside, paralyzed by indecision. As men came up to me to give the command, I balked. I looked everywhere among the crowds of men for Paen. Finally, I saw a figure in the distance wearing a white, wide-sleeved kaftan. He was approaching us. It was him. He smiled at me. He took me aside, placed his hands against my shoulders and said, "Did you really think I would not accompany you at least part of the way? We will go as far as we can together, of course." He said this and then winked and embraced me. He instructed me to add Kwanan, his Mera, to the team that would pull the main carriage. I did this happily, adding him to the center of the leading row, now 5 in all with 2 following. "I would not miss this for all the world, Jeshoya," he said, grinning at me. I helped the Master into the carriage and placed all of his things within it to his liking. I fetched additional water bags for him, collected his teas and his teapot, and Darlian configured the bench of the carriage with shading and netting. My brother and I then added ourselves to the protective line of Mayras that would ride along the sides. I rode on the left side, on Nanui, Dar on the right, riding Whitemane. The Master drove the main carriage with Medea riding along with him. A softly padded bench was created for her to sit or lay on, and the multi-layered and protective confines of the white square canopy. The second carriage contained all our provisions, ammunition, and tools, as well as Brent's payment. It was pulled by 4 Mayras, driven by Bryn. By midday, everyone was ready and we headed south. The Master, Darlin, and I rode second in the order of Mayras. Tasajeda and Banwido rode in front of us. Bryn rode behind me. The sun hid behind thick cloud cover, and the humidity was heavy. Late that morning, after a heated debate with Bryn, it was decided that in order to ultimately avoid the imminent dark clouds of battle approaching, the only real danger in Paen's eyes, we had to travel as far south as possible along the northern edge of the great river and almost to the coast. The Master stressed that Medea's safety was of the utmost importance. The Khoorhani men and our liege obeyed without question. Our guides were confident we could push through the oppressively thick jungle by cleaving through it. For this, we carried ample supplies of machetes. They are sharp. We cut it down and get you there, Master, one of our guides said, smiling through his half-rotted teeth. Despite being men of the Ta, I noticed that each of these men became Paens completely the instant they arrived in his sacred land. Many had bowed their heads and expressed their gladness in being chosen to join us on this journey, most knowing it to be the last Paen would ever be seen again. Most of the morning, in fact, Paen was presented with various gifts. Our brothers sent gifts with their men. He blessed everyone and left no one unnoticed. All Mayras were turned toward Paen, a perfect circle of 200 looking at him, the Master, who sat in the carriage, silent. We were still as he regarded everyone. The sky then released the sun from the clouds, and we were off. 2 lines of Mayra men, 10 on each side, rode beside the Master and Medea's carriage, and each man had a fully loaded rifle slung along his back. The 2 up front, Tasajeda and Banwido, carried long spears. The rest followed behind us, their own supplies carried in bulging saddlebags. We traveled south along the great river and arrived at Kushaiti after a few days. Replenishing our supplies, we followed the river until it bent eastward toward the Bantu territories, where we pressed through thick bush. Despite the dense vegetation, our pace was quick, as we did not want to be seen. The Bantu were not our enemies, but we wanted attention from no one. We went as far as we could that day and cleared an area where we camped. We formed a tight circle of torches, and the guards took shifts at the edges with their guns to watch in the blackness for tigers' eyes, hunting in the night. Thankfully, the first night in the southern region went without incident. Nights later, however, warriors were taken in their sleep, devoured. This set the tone for much of the journey along the river. 2 more men were attacked another night. To address the situation, the captains doubled the guard assignments. Occasionally a rifle crack would shatter the silence of the night. Fascinated by the beasts, Bren took charge of patrols that hunted the Manju tigers. One night Bren sat by firelight and fussed with the radio he had torn from his ship. Mountain Nest still ignored his pleas. The humidity of the far south was thick, and we were tortured by the mosquitoes that swarmed us. Dalle and I could see was pockmarked by their feeding on him. Mosquitoes, I believe, were the least of his worries, though. He still seemed relatively high in spirits as he drank from his water bag and looked over Bren's shoulder as Bren tinkered with the machine. Dar and I played chess by firelight. The master and Medea rested in the protective confines of the tent we brought. 2 torches on poles stood in the ground at the tent's entrance, and Sasojada stood at one end. Several of us took turns guarding the perimeter, 12 men on 3-hour shifts, with torches and rifles to keep constant watch for the tigers. No one seemed to sleep much most nights, nervous about what would emerge from the brush, and so days traveling were always rough. Going now was very slow, as hour upon hour we painstakingly advanced, following the team of men with machetes hacking through the southern jungle. Our guides began to bicker. One worried that the other was getting us lost, but we pressed slowly onward, occasionally graced by easier terrain that lifted our spirits, only to be lured back into the thick. Dar and I took turns hacking the brush and clearing any obstacles that stood in the path of the team. We did this going uphill, thorns and green spray assaulting the skin. And we did this going downhill, roots and vines frustrating our footstep. At times we got an overhead view of thick green before us, daunted by the expanse of it and our apparent lack of progress in advancing through it. To keep our spirits high, Darlian and I sang old Khoorhani songs. After about an hour of it, the master said, "How about a song about the divine?" Darlian, more musically inclined, started a line and sang. Paen is that, he is that. Ashuta's heart, he is that heart. And it was so simple and sung so sweetly that I easily joined in. We kept cutting rhythmically to our singing, disappeared into it, and soon over my shoulder I saw that we had cut a good amount of distance ahead of the caravan, allowing them to keep a good pace. We kept singing, not stopping, and a few more men ran up to join us, machetes in hand, and added their voices. We became more unified and worked together now. Men came forward with water bags to offer drinks to those cutting down the thicket. Some machetes, held by inspired hands, then came forward, helping us to press deeply. Soon men added torches behind us as the sun began to set. We seemed to have descended noticeably deeper into the jungle, and after a few more miles, the master declared that it was time to set up camp. All the torches were lit, a circle of them around the main fire ablaze in front of the master's large tent in which Darlian and I sat with him. Darlian and I were exhausted, itchy, and sore. Paen only seemed to look at us with an unending grin, satisfied with the day's work. Medea slept nearby, exhausted by the Ghanaian heat. I am happy for this journey with you, the master said, and we smiled. I'm happy that Medea has arrived and that my final journey is underway. He said this to us, noticing our faces, shocked by mention of his final journey. Now, don't be unhappy. Don't possess me by being that way. That is not the way I taught you. Sing. Keep that song of me alive in your heart. Don't ever stop it, my sons. And you are my sons, and so be happy in your love of me. I know you look at me, Jeshoya, and you see the age fully on my face now, and I know it makes you sad. What I say to you is what I've always said to you. I am everything. What you ever experience as being removed from your company is not what I am. What I say to you, what I've always said to you, and will continue to say forevermore to you in your heart of hearts is, be what I am. Yes, don't look to me, but be what I am. You have my permission to be that free. Yes, be that free. And he laughed even as I began to cry. It felt as if a lance had punched through the membranes holding all that I really felt about this journey, and let it all out. I threw myself down before him and kissed his feet. I could not bear to let him go. He lifted me as he rose, smothered me in his loving embrace, kissing my cheeks, imploring me to hear him. He held me strongly and pressed his heart into my own. The time is near, yes, but I am always here. You will see it. You need only do what I told you. Be what I am. Many days later, the jungle loosened, and our party moved more freely along the great river. We camped by it and rested our meras. While alone with the master, by the river as we walked, I carried Medea, and he reminded me again, you must never leave her side. He framed it as an imperative requirement, and beneath the sunlight I could not avoid the lines of his face. I knew the master was returning to Eastern Genia, returning to the goddess, to no longer carry his body. Yes, master, is all I could say. I did not know how to fulfill this request, as so much of it was beyond me. I kept throwing it off as I did the reality that Paen was leaving. I could not face it. You must swear it to me, he said, taking hold of my arm suddenly. I swear I'll never leave her side. Good. You are the last Jeshibian, the last of my Khoorhani, each one of you mine, each one of you my work, he said, making the circling motion of sanding us to smoothness with his open palms. And now you are my last one, my last Khoorlrhani Warrior, to protect her. But master, how can I protect her? I don't even know what I'm doing. I pretty much lost it. Bewildered. Well, because God says so. I say so. So, relax. It will be clear to you. If you intend to do it, you will succeed, but you must take care to do this in the same manner that I took care of you. Now you see how it works, Jeshibian, my last Khoorhani Warrior. She is your child now. I am, placed innocently in the palm of your hands. Your practice is yours now. Your child now. You no longer have the luxury of being a boy. You must take care. You must intend to enter your practice at the next level. Do you understand? Yes, I think I do. I said, good. Now don't worry or you'll foul it all up, he joked, laughing uproariously. Then, throwing an arm around me, he fed me dates as we walked along the shore of the lake. Behind us was the deep green jungle against the rolling hillsides we had traveled down. To the south, a blue ribbon of ocean could be seen. I had never seen the ocean before. I took in the sweetness of the air, a calming breath. Doubt is an exercise in Jandi, I muttered in realization. That is right. Stay clear of self-esteem. High or low, I say it is garbage. It slows you down along the path. I say, sing my name. And be what I am, I parroted. I mean, be what you are. And who is that? Paen tested. Eternity. And you will really find this out if your practice is truly your child. There was a commotion that night. Gunfire. 10 men came out of the darkness to report that Bren killed a Manju tiger. One of 3 that had been following us. The next night, another of our men was killed in the night. Bren intended to skin his catch and enjoy it as a trophy, but Paen would not have it. Instead, he instructed us to take the carcass to a place of the master's choosing. We did so, and then we were not followed by any more tigers. Many days later, we finally approached the southern Ghanaian highlands, majestically jutting upward into the horizon. We cheered at the sight of them. Slate-gray clouds loomed above them. We knew that in a few days' time, our journey would become an uphill endeavor, perhaps the most dangerous portion of the journey. I rode in the carriage with Medea at times and played with her. We walked alongside the caravan as I carried her against my hip. The master watched me with her and he winked at me. She napped, her head resting against my shoulder. She was always perfectly silent, seeming not to make much of any sound at all, only a mere breath in her laughing or crying. She liked to walk in the tall grasses by the riverside or wade in the shallows of the river. She would squat over the water and point at the small fish she observed. As we journeyed, I loved her beyond words, and as the master's words resonated within me, I only wanted to love her more. So when her arms were raised toward me, I enthusiastically picked her up. I found after 3 days of this that I could not bear to be without her. I noticed where she was all the time and what her state was. I became protective of her. Darlian began to notice. She's really taken to you, Jeshibian. I grinned as I walked with her holding my hand. She was smarter than any child her age of our kind. She would hold the end of my index finger and lead me to items hidden in the grass, nesting birds, or strange rocks. We began our ascent up the side of the mountain. A small party scouted ahead to plot the best course for the carriages to follow. Our trek was grueling work, as the teams of the maras that pulled the carts struggled with their loads. Bren tended mainly to the carriage that held his payment.
No! Here! You take this, let me handle that.
The master walked outside of the carriage, holding the child, his other arm supporting himself with a heavy staff. It struck me deep just then that I would not be returning, and that everything that I would see from this moment on would be for the first and last time. I had not even considered exactly how I planned to leave, or even where I'd be leaving to. Banks, I wondered, the thought so abstract to me. Pushing the thought off, I focused on making it up the steep ridge that the mountain led us to. It was narrow, and the drop beyond the ledge was intimidating. We slowly traversed it for what seemed like an endless number of hours. Two men attended Paen, walking beside him to hold a shade over his head to block out the searing sun as we climbed into higher altitude. We rested for an hour, then resumed for another eternity. The entire time, Paen was but a walking grin. He kissed Medea's cheek and could be seen whispering to her. My ankles and knees ached as I pulled Nanui behind me, but I could not help a certain giddiness as I looked out at the expanse of the land before me. Its velvet and purple rose backed by several gradations of black and gray, softness in the approach of twilight. I was happy. The mountain leaned back. My thighs and lungs seemed to burst. I grinned with the heat in my belly for this life. I reflected on my life, how Paen so moved me. He helped me see the insanity of us all, the insanity of our being entitled princes and princesses, all dreaming for ego's crown of self-esteem, its broken promises of fulfillment. I knew him to be victorious and always profoundly demonstrating what was true, what he is. Precisely that, what she is. But the Ta and his progeny, all those lost in the spell of inwardly beholding privacy, I knew were being left to this realm in its petty judgments. No one would be saved. I knew now that's what my dream of the fireball meant. Only those who noticed him and truly investigated beyond the coil of the two-headed dream snake could behold themselves standing as he is, as everything high and low. Only then could eyes be as diamonds, like Master Paen's. I looked over at Dalle and felt love for my brother. I wept knowing that Paen had won, for I knew forgiveness, knew love, and I yearned to hold the love beyond the fading of our time. The mountain pitched steeper still, and upward he pulled us, the Khoorhani, his men now, devotees to bring him home. And I was never to cease to walk with his most cherished beloved. He kissed her. I was happy because I would never forget his profound demonstration. I was happy for being so graced, so honored by his divine company my entire life. I was happy for my pure luck. I was happy because even though he was leaving, I knew he could never be gone, for he was eternity. "Stop here!" the master commanded. "Jeshibian Khoorhani!" he called out to me, and I ran up the front of the line to meet him. The ledge had widened out onto an expanse of a large dome. Granite stretched far north, and the descent we would make was before us. Electricity was in the air. I came to him. The master was beaming, glowing, holding Medea. He handed her to me. "Dalle," he called, "come with me, my sons." We, along with Sasojada and Banwido, followed. Bren instructed the rest of the party to set up camp. We followed the master northward along the face of the dome, then along ledges that went further upward. The master's pace was relentless, and we pushed on for a good 2 hours before we stopped. The air was thin, cold. It was dark now and windy. Dalle successfully lit a fire using Bren's lighter. "Ah," the master said. "Good thing you brought that." We sat by his feet, troubled, but the master said nothing for a long time, only radiated and greeted the mountain with loving force. I knew that he was home. In the distance I saw lightning wildly striking the tops of the highlands. An intense storm was brewing, the winds gathering cloud cover. "So," the master began, and there was then more lightning, the rock beneath us seeming to build a mighty charge. "What you must know." Paen pressed his hands at me, and I felt a great force of him enter into my nervous system. I saw it again. Planet Banks. I saw the purple sky over the ocean that was in the vision given to me by Medea, but my sense of it was now complete and vivid and unmistakable. It was a sacred place of black cliffs against ocean, and within those cliffs resided the greatest power that could never be lost, never again. And in my breast, in my heart, in my mind was the revelation of complete and utter victory. I saw a beauty so profound that I threw my head back in ecstatic surrender and yielded, disappeared. I accepted it, and it untied me at the heart and belly. My eyes were no longer of my head, but of what flooded into me, ever present and unending, divine reality. And this time, I was only that. No self to be goaded back into the worriment of character. That pleasure of open heart was so sweet, so gentle, so pure, so real, so in love with the majesty of already perfect and here heart of an innocent at play, kissing the splendid rings of the divine. Paen sat before me, radiant. His eyes were on me, but looked beyond that me, to where that one really was located as his heart. And he drew me there, where we were bodiless, formless. Him as he is, non-separate. I am that. I wept in gladness of such oneness, of this singular confidence of no one, of such grand freedom, this profound homecoming. I am free. I sat quiet for some time. Then I began to wrap myself in mind and return to my body, again looking outward. Paen's gentle grin was there as he sat still, leaning against a staff and wrapped at the shoulders. Darlian anointed his feet with oil. Sasajeda and Bonwito were present, and they also tended his body. That night, of all nights, I thought we would have words. But the master was silent. Our hearts communicated, and he insisted that I listen this way. I bowed before him, kissed his feet, and cried. I even laughed at his comical nature in the silence. As the wind began to soften over time and the lightning ceasing, we all made our beds and laid near him as he ceaselessly grinned, taken in by her. Ashuta, Paen's beloved. That night I dreamt of Paen. Just use my old teapot, he said, teasing me and pushing me past my funeral attendant's mood. And bring me to this spot right here. I took in the space around me within the dream. It was beautiful. Before me was Paen's dream tree. In the morning, Master Paen was no longer in his body. The fire that Darlian began had fed over the night, and was large enough to cremate the master's body. Darlian and I collected the ashes into his old teapot, and Darlian and I, as he instructed, hiked 6 miles north until I found the master's birthplace. It appeared exactly the way it did in the dream. There was a small river that cut through the mountain, and we followed it until we got to a small waterfall that gushed heavily, bands of color in its spray. A magnificent bristlecone tree, large and full, was nearby. The master only described these trees to me. This was the first time I had ever saw one, except in the dream. That's it, I said. That's where Ashuta gave him Mahabharata. Darlian placed the master's ashes next to the tree, and then I leaned Mahabharata against it. Darlian and I wept, and we bowed and wept some more. Then we exchanged a few funny stories about Master Paen. As we left, we went on more in that manner. Just as we started down to get back on the trail, I looked back, and by the Rainbow Falls was a large tiger seated by the master's sword. The 5 of us met and descended together, rejoining the caravan by sunset. Our camp was encircled by pit fires and lit torches held in the ground. Many of the other Khoorhrhani wandered along the great granite expanse of the dome. They came to us to hear word of the master. We told them that Paen had died. They all sat grieving, many in disbelief. Bren met me, his face somber, his eyes cast downward in remorse. I then just realized how inconsolable the world had just become, and that the mission of consolation was up to me now. I went to Medea, where she was standing in the tent, and I squatted before her. She smiled and gestured that we should walk together. I rose, offered her my index finger, which she took in her small hand, and we walked. After we returned, Medea slept in the tent, and I had a meal by firelight. We were all quiet, somber. Then, we heard a screech from Bren's wooden-paneled radio. It hissed. And then...
Agnes Falcon, müssen Sie uns lesen? Agnes Falcon, Sie zum Companion.
Bren jumped up to his feet. Ah! He yelled, and he jumped around, hooting. Several of us jumped up with him in celebration. He then quickly sat down and removed the bronze mouthpiece and spoke into it. Bergnes, das ist Falcon. Ich habe gelesen, Sie laut undeutlich. Wir kapieren. Bitte senden auf Encryption Channel 87. Wähler holen Channel 87. Mountain Nest replied. The accent was harsher, not understandable. Bren removed a small piece of metal from the radio compartment, made a change to it, and then reinserted it. I paid closer attention, wanting to understand. Okay, Bergnes, sind wir bereit? Bren responded, the accent different.
Die Linie ist jetzt dunkel. Gehen Sie vor, Falcon.
The line is now dark. Go ahead, Falcon. Mountain Nest, this is Byron. I have the package. Repeat, I have the package.
Glad to hear your voice, Major. Where is your location?
I've made it around to the southern end of the western mountain range, headed for the flatlands. Any chance for a pickup?
You're a long way off and about 4 months too late. Major, it was just blind luck. I checked to see if you were still out there. Command's given up on you. We've got no ships that aren't engaged in the north already.
Fine. Okay, I'll be there in 4 days.
Major, the situation has degraded. You've only got 2 days before the last transport leaves. Otherwise, you'll have to stay in orbit here for 6 months or more.
2 days? You listen to me. I have her. Do you copy that?
I do, but I can...
No, quiet. Answer me this. Is Geraint Goddard still Riffside? Put the radio down and go get him on the other end, please.
Yes, sir.
It was quiet for an uncomfortable amount of time, all of us pressing together in the circle until another voice broke through.
Byron, you saucy bastard. Are you there?
Geraint! Yes, it's me. Look, I'm not dead, and neither is she. I need transport for her. I can wait, but she can't.
Fine. Get here in 3 days, and not a day later. Can you do that?
Yes, but look, I need another favor.
I'm not surprised. What can I do for you, Major?
I need munitions. GRYT pistols, maybe some rifles for the indigenous Oda tribes that I'm with.
What? What do I look like, an armory?
You need to make this happen, Geraint. There is an entire empire ripe for the picking over these hills. I don't know how any of us missed them, but you need to send that package and some advisors.
How much inventory are we talking about?
At least 1,000.
Oh, that's all.
There's gold, Geraint. It will do all the talking. There was a measurable pause. Static. Then... Are you there?
I'm listening.
Look, it will be well worth your while, but now's the moment, and I've made a reasonable offer. If we don't make good on it... Bren's silence insinuated the rest.
The tracks will for us.
Geraint finished the statement. Yes, you understand me. We don't want this army fighting on their side.
I'll make it happen. Anything else, Majesty?
You just hold that damn ship by orders of, I don't know, the Paljalian Congressional Space Authority or whatever. Use my call sign if you have to, and drop 2 crates of the best you can get under the circumstances to Nakayo. Hey, I have 200 Odan with me. And inform Nakayo command not to open fire on us as we cross the fields. On our best behavior, okay?
Okay, Byron. You got it. Don't spend all that gold.
I won't. Certain nuances escaped me, but I was fast learning to hear Bren's tongue and understood what was said. He placed the brass mouthpiece back on the handle and walked about excitedly, pressing his attention to the east as the sun ducked behind the mountains. I followed him. "Who are the Trikes, Bren?" I asked. The question threw him. He visibly shook with fright as he whirled to look at me. "Josh, you're impressive in your listening. You understood. We are Odan?" "Our word, yes, well, for you. You know, I've heard the word Khoorhani for the first time after my crash. We on Bane refer to you as, what will the Trikes do to us?" I pressed. "Josh, so many questions. I cannot make them all clear right now. Answer me! Who are the Trikes?" I yelled at him. Bren held out a hand, his white sleeves billowing in the wind. "Okay." He took a breath and then squatted, black boots shifting over dust and rock. He then stood up and gathered his hair by the red tie. With one arm pointing to the northeast, he said, "The Trikes are there." Then he turned to his right and pointed more directly east and said, "And we are there." Bren walked toward me, his form sinewy, his more warrior-like aspects apparent now in his manner. "A century ago, Bane, my planet, settled there. We have 4 colonial towns, and the Trikes followed us 5 years ago. We've been at war for many more years. Bane fights for Sten, but mainly we fight to protect our own homeworlds beyond the rift," Bren said, his gaze somber and deep. "What is Sten?" I asked, unsettled, angry. "Oh, for fuck's sake, Sten, a planet, your world, your one great land or whatever. Bane wants it, and now so do the Trikes." He threw up his hands in frustration. I lowered my eyes. In that moment, I felt like a veil had been lifted and I could see the agonizing truth of what it was likely to be the Khoorhani's future: subjugation by an even greater army. I could still barely believe what I had heard. Empires greater than Khoorhani fighting over the horizon and now heading our way. "I'm sorry, Josh," was all Bren could say to me. "What is the rift?" Relentlessly, we pushed on. I rode in the carriage with Medea, wanting only to be with her, feeding her and tending to her. I occasionally stopped the caravan, despite Bren's displeasure, to allow her to walk, to explore the land, the streams and the dry lake beds we passed. She was extremely interested in everything, and so I only delighted in her delight. Twice we camped beneath open sky, beneath the glittered dome of Sten, the name of my world as I now knew it. I sat by Bren and looked at him, the same question on my face, but no longer with the sting of blaming him for what was happening. What was the rift? It's hard to explain it, Josh. The rift is like a hole in space. It's the only way we can get here to Sten. He drew 2 straight parallel lines in the dirt, and at one end of the first line closer to him, he drew a circle to illustrate the hole. Dragging the stick along the first line to the hole, Bren said, "So we travel through the rift, this hole here, and when we come out the other end, we arrive here, Billions of light years away, apparently. He then moved his pointing stick to the beginning of the next line. To where Sten is, the lines are planes of reference, time-space dimensions, realities. I don't really know. I'm no Sergio Banksy. He explained in some detail what he knew about it, all the while confessing his knowledge of it being limited. I listened as carefully as I could, noticing Darlian's face grow long. I lightly punched his arm, smiling at him. It's like a dream portal, I mused. Like Paen's tree, I grunted, glancing at Darlian, whom I had told about my dreams. Both Darlian and Bren were not interested in my dreams. Okay, sure, whatever, dream tree, whatever, Bren said. He went on to explain that Bane and their enemies, the Trikes, fought for control of the regions in the plains where diamonds were mined. But not actual diamonds, Bren said. It's called tension. It's kind of a super fuel. The next morning, we both rode on the carriage, I holding the reins, our mares tethered to the rear. Nothing will ever be the same when we return, will it? Darlian murmured. His heart was heavy. I tried to reassure him that he should not worry, but I could not meet his eyes. On the horizon, man-made structures came into view. In the greater distance, I could see a giant spire. It was bulky, fat. A drill, Bren explained. The expanse of the nearby town, backed by a distant row of mountains, was considerable. Many multi-leveled structures and a single enclosure, a dark metallic fence with tall posts surrounding it. Bren looked back at us, pointed, and grinned. Nakayo, he said. My stomach turned. What was I to do? I looked back at the sleeping child, Medea, resting on her bench. Soon a detachment of vehicles headed our way. They buzzed along on 6 wheels, my first encounter with the mechanized transporters that Bren had told me about. Bren told us to slow to a halt, and then rode out ahead. As he met the men and showed them his mark, rapidly spoke to them, instructing, ordering, and then snapping the reins of his mera, he rejoined our group, with one of the vehicles circling to the back of us. The rest rode ahead of us. We followed them into the opening mouth of the fence. This was it. I was leaving, and yet I could not simply ask Bren to take me. What would I do? How would I pull this off? Would I, failing Master Paen, be riding Nanui back to Arkaya along with Darlian? Once in the fenced area, my attention was diffused. The sun was high and yellow, and dust was blowing in the air as vehicles passed us and led us deeper into the large camp. The buildings were sturdy, made of metal and beige material, plastic, and they sat in straight rows, at least 4 of them. Above the rooftops, I could see the mastheads of many grounded ships, their silhouettes, some like the one Bren crashed north of Arkaya. Some were massive. The Khoorlrhani riders looked about themselves curiously. Bren came to us, followed by 4 men whose eyes were obscured by plastic lenses. Bren looked up to me and said, Medea must go with them. Where? I stammered. Josh, we are here now. They must take her home, he said. Why was she here, Bren? Why must she go with them? Bren climbed up the carriage and pressed behind me, waking and picking Medea up. We don't have time. That ship will leave without her, he said, jumping down with her. Everything happening so quickly. Bren handed her over to the strangers. I then jumped down and ran toward her, but I was held back by Sasojeda, who in Mayak said, "Patience, young one. Set your shot." Sasojeda's eyes were ablaze with commitment to Paen's work, and that was comforting that he saw my plight. The strangers ran off with Medea, and my heart felt like it was ripping apart as I saw the figures becoming obscured by the dust and distance. I noticed one of the largest ships, its hulking mass, a hunched silhouette against lavender sky, was preparing to lift away by the noise that it made.
"Josh!"
Bren called. I turned, and he stood alongside another man.
"This is Geraint! He will show you to the weapons!"
He yelled, as the sound of the distant ship became deafeningly loud. My impulse to run for her was again held back in check by Sasojeda as he stepped in my path.
"Yeah, okay,"
I said weakly, and looked at Bren, and then with my eyes told Sasojeda to go with him. To go with Geraint and trade the damn gold. He looked at me, and cleverly and Mayak Sasojeda said, "I will help you." Darlian was by my side now. Help you what? The men all moved to a large black tent where my brother's precious armory awaited, and Sasojeda ordered the others to remove the gold from the carriages and bring it, to follow him. He kept looking at me, subtly signaling to me that I should stay right where I was and call no attention to myself. Sasojeda was big and broad in his movements, taking on the lead role for the Khoorhani, who were all armed with rifles, spears, and swords, and were followed by armed Banish men who were keeping the area secure. Help you what, Jeshibian? Dar. I looked into those sharpshooter's eyes. Wait, you're going? You're leaving me, brother? He sighed and rolled his eyes at me. Well, it figures, you know. I embraced him and said, "The master said I should never leave her side. I didn't really know that it would require this." My hands were sweating, my knees weak. I saw Bren and Geraint in the large black tent nod at one another, shake hands, and then Bren waved to him. Then he ran the dusty road toward the ship without even as much of a glance in my direction. I was again caught in Darlian's malaise. I knew already I did, but I mean the way that you've been with her, I've tried not to think about it till now, Darlian said. Hey though, you dreamed this, so you gotta go, right? I looked over at Sasojeda, who nodded, and then he became belligerent with the traders, complaining, yelling, and making everyone nervous. He was creating a dangerous diversion. I glanced around me, and I was well beyond the sphere of being noticed. Darlian picked me up, and nearly crushing my ribs, he then said, "Go!" And I did. But I ran back to him. Hey, will you take care of Nanui? What? Of course, idiot! Now go! And my brother, waving to me, was the last time I would see him. Or so I thought. I ran another route, another road that paralleled Bren, pushing past the Banes who were not concerned by me, as I no doubt was assumed to be an Odon worker, a mere plainsman, working the Banish mines. I ran hard to where the ship could be seen in its entirety. The idle roar of its engines was an assault to my ears as I pressed against the wire fence. Bren's jump shuttle was huge. I saw Bren run to the vessel across a black, smooth asphalt surface, where he passed two guards in deep green clothing who greeted him and then moved off of the surface, their backs turned to me. I shook, trembling to the core. I, a simple Khoorhani, dared to approach this dragon of a craft before me. Could I do this? My buckling knees indicated no. I then thought to run away, back to Archaea. I sighed. Then, in my breast, I felt her call, Medea's heart beating as my own heart. Her ever-strong heartbeat felt as a yearning that could not go unanswered. Despite all my shaking and sweating, I could not refuse. The hatch doorway, leading into the belly of the black and gray behemoth, began to rise. Suddenly I heard voices behind me. A group of guards headed my way. I bolted across that black asphalt as the doorway slowly came up, and I jumped into the mouth of the beast, the doorway shutting behind me, pressing tightly against a shiny metal surface. A closed doorway. I was trapped, neither in nor out of the ship. Against a reflective surface, I could see clearly behind me through a small round window, looking out at the black surface. The ship then roared, and I felt lifted, and I saw the asphalt surface become a square, framed in the circular edges of the window behind me. The black square shrank and disappeared, a mere speck held now by the amber-colored square of Nakayo, framed by the black fence, and this quickly shrank and disappeared, engulfed by vapor, clouds, as all around me shook violently and rumbled like a volcano. What a stupid thing I'm doing, I thought. I was certain I had stepped into the moment of my death, for as if in the mouth of a beast, I felt the enclosure of this space, the heat of its breath, and the viciousness of its fangs, as they mercilessly pressed into me. Horrified, I could barely breathe, and felt faint and unbearably hot. My voice was a high-pitched scream, the explosion of it heard, but muffled, made anonymous by the roaring of machinery as blue fire lapped at my back. Singed clothing, burned hair, and curled skin. I was being burned alive. I could smell my own destruction, and my wailing was but a useless gesture frustrated by bonds that would not free me. I writhed and tugged, but to no avail. Oddly aware of tears streaming down my face and the urine down my leg. I knew I was a dead man, and with my head threatening to burst, to be snuffed out, just before I could no longer hold on as pain well exceeded my ability to endure it, my eyes rolled back. And then forward again, to fix themselves on what was reflected against the metal. The composite of the mountain, cloud cover, and ocean, all neatly edged by the blackness of the starry sky, which then revealed to me the entirety, my great one land, swimming in the emptiness of the heavens, an orb, Sten, my world, a planet. Ready to die, to let go and leave this agony, everything went mercifully black. In dream, the branches of Paen's tree released me, sent me adrift. Am I dead? I wondered, my subtle body floating cartwheels into the bright sun.